Kremlin's old songs. Lavrov asked the US to resume negotiations with Putin, but before that, he stated that the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine are mandatory conditions for ending the war. Fierce fighting continues in the Pokrovsk and Zaporizhzhia directions, where the occupying army is increasing the intensity and scale of its assaults and how Ukrainian units continue to destroy enemy forces. We will show and tell you everything in detail very soon. 1,500 kilometers from Ukraine, an oil refinery in Russia's Orsk has been attacked. The Saratov oil refinery and several other facilities in Russia have also come under attack. Find out where else explosions have erupted in our report. New outbursts from Putin's media lackeys. Skabiva and Popov have found a new enemy. And it's not even Zelensky or Trump. We'll tell and show you everything right now, but in the meantime, don't forget to like this episode. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited frontline Kherson and published an address to Ukrainians on the 3rd anniversary of the liberation of the regional center. We remember that joy, the tears and embraces, the gratitude you feel when you see your own returning. The occupiers fled Kherson thanks to the strength of our people, the president wrote. During his working trip to Kherson, Volodymyr Zelensky also held a meeting with the military and representatives of security forces, in particular with units of the unmanned systems forces. Units of these unmanned systems forces, including Magyar's birds, will expand their capabilities in this region. Volodymyr Zelensky also held a meeting with Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky. According to the president, the situation remains most difficult in the Pokrovsk direction and in the Zaporizhzhia region, where the Russian army is increasing the intensity and scale of its assaults. Zelensky noted that the current weather conditions are favorable for enemy attacks, but Ukrainian units continue to destroy enemy forces. More details about what is happening on the front line are coming up in our military review.
Pokrovsk is on the brink. Fighting there is non-stop, and the Russians are shelling the city with every weapon they have.
Ukraine's defense forces are holding on to the high-rise district. It is precisely the use of these tall buildings that gives Ukraine's defense forces a significant advantage in improving their tactical positions. Moreover, the intensity of strikes on the positions of Ukraine's defense forces in the Pokrovsk direction using glide bombs reaches up to 200 to 300 per day. In addition, the occupiers' tactics involve so-called combined attacks, that is, using both glide bombs and accordingly heavy flamethrower systems.
It is reported that the defense forces managed to loosen the enemy's encirclement in the area of the Pokrovsk pocket, which allowed Ukrainian defenders to catch their breath.
Logistics are in place. Ukraine's defense forces are conducting active combat operations, not allowing the occupiers to gain a foothold on the outskirts of this settlement. The situation in the Pokrovsk direction is difficult, but at the moment, Ukraine's defense forces are carrying out stabilization measures to prevent further advances by Russian occupation troops.
Syrsky reports that Russia has transferred 150,000 troops and plans to encircle Pokrovsk and neighboring towns.
At the same time as the situation in Pokrovsk, the occupiers are sharply intensifying combat operations in the Lyman direction. There, the enemy grouping numbers about 90,000 personnel. So, as we can see, they are trying to attack in several directions at once, with the aim of capturing territories in Donetsk region that are controlled by Ukraine's defense forces.
But how many Russians will die for these cities doesn't really bother the bunker grandpa. But a Russian blogger still decided to talk about it. And
so, for the sake of two small towns, Russia has already killed 80 to 100,000 of its own soldiers. Russia killed them, I repeat, it wasn't Ukraine that killed them, it was Russia.
well, of course, what do those 100,000 people matter, right? Putin surely knows what he's doing. Or does he just not care after all? In
Germany during the period of World War II, at the time when it was actively capturing and occupying Norway, France and Poland, lost far fewer people and soldiers than Russia has lost for these two relatively small towns. This comparison highlights the scale of losses.
the commander-in-chief of the armed forces announced that Russia is preparing a final maneuver aimed at capturing the entire Donetsk region.
Let me emphasize again, that's about 170,000 troops for the capture of the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration. This is what the Russian military command is planning. That is, both the fighting near Pokrovsk and, accordingly, the efforts of the Russian occupation army to take control of areas in the Donetsk region are being nullified at this moment.
Nevertheless, Z channels are publishing videos of Russian soldiers entering Pokrovsk. Strangely enough, after 4 years of war, in this case, they are thanking the fog. But just as they entered, they perished. Apparently, fog is not a very reliable ally. The Ukrainian military are not giving an inch to the Russians and are eliminating them one by one.
There have been significant tactical successes in the Rodinsk area. The settlement has been completely cleared, and considering its strategic importance, it's a key logistical route that passes through this settlement. It is now under the control of Ukraine's defense forces. Ukraine's defense forces are conducting successful counteroffensive operations in the area of the settlement of Sharkov.
Apparently, because of this, Russia has begun a mass recruitment of volunteers to guard important facilities from drones. But we know very well where these volunteers will end up soon.
In the decree signed by the Russian dictator regarding the recruitment of so-called reservists to guard strategic facilities on the territory of the Russian Federation, according to the Russian side itself, there are certain loopholes that allow the use of these operational reserves to replenish personnel directly on the front line of contact. In fact, this is a covert mobilization taking place in the Russian Federation.
Meanwhile, in Russia itself, as always, things are heating up. This time, friendly drones paid a visit to the oil refinery in Saratov. As they say, envy in silence. The main thing is just how much admiration there is.
Envy in silence while I stand by the window. Drew. Oh, it exploded.
Long-range drones from the Alpha SBU Special Operations Center successfully struck the Orsk-Nefteorsk Intez oil refinery, located in Orsk-Orenburg region of the Russian Federation. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine also officially confirmed the hit. The distance to the target was 1,400 kilometers. This refinery is one of the leading oil processing plants in the Russian Federation. At least 4 explosions occurred on the plant's territory, after which heavy smoke was observed. This is already the second blast by the Security Service of Ukraine at this facility. The first one happened on October 3rd of this year. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian Defense Forces struck the Saratov oil refinery, the marine oil terminal JSC in Feodosia, and a number of facilities in the temporarily occupied territory of Donetsk region. This was reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. It is reported that the strike on the Saratov refinery was carried out on November 11th. The facility produces more than 20 types of petroleum products. These include gasoline, fuel oil, diesel fuel, vacuum gas oil, and technical sulfur. In addition, it is involved in meeting the needs of the Russian occupation army. A series of explosions was recorded, after which a massive fire was observed in the target area. The results of the strikes are being clarified, the General Staff added. Ukraine does not leave the barbaric attacks on its energy infrastructure unanswered. For every strike on our facilities, there are equally painful strikes on the energy sector of the aggressor country. Russians need to get used to living without light and heat, as retaliatory attacks will only intensify. And while Ukrainians have already adapted to blackouts over the past 3 winters, for Putin's subjects this will be something new, and as we know, winters in Russia are long and cold.
On the night of November 9th, the Ukrainian armed forces struck the Voronezh thermal power plant. After the strike, electricity disappeared in several homes, but then was restored. The Voronezh thermal power plant is one of the largest suppliers of thermal energy in the region and provides it to 4 districts of the city.
It happened right before my eyes. I had just stepped out onto the balcony. Right over there, apparently along the power lines. No, well, I heard 3, but they're saying 4.
In Belgorod, this incident was attacked, leaving tens of thousands of residents without electricity. The governor of the region, Vyacheslav Gladkov, stated that the damage is very serious.
As a result of last night's rocket attack, there is now serious and significant damage to the city's essential power and heating supply systems in Belgorod. But our energy workers, as always, are heroically trying to cope with the task at hand. Right now, The dedicated workers are carefully working to restore and repair everything that was damaged and destroyed by our enemies.
A day earlier, Ukrainian drones struck energy facilities in Saratov, Engels, and the Volgograd region. Power outages were also reported there. With massive drone and missile attacks, Russia is trying to plunge Ukraine into a blackout. In response, the Ukrainian army is carrying out symmetrical strikes on Russia's energy infrastructure. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that the authorities are ready and will not only defend the infrastructure, but also strike back in response. What
will happen with electricity? Today it's hard for me to say. We will be ready for any retaliatory challenges. We work on this every day. We will defend, we will fight. Russians should know that step by step we will increase the production of everything necessary so that they also feel what we are feeling. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine. In
2025, Russia is seeing a trend toward a growing electricity shortage as of October this year. The shortage of capacity in the power grid has reached tens of gigawatts. This was reported by the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine.
Due to demand from industrial, residential, and municipal consumers exceeding the total generation of all power plants, as of October this year, the shortage of capacity in the power grid has already reached 25 gigawatts. Despite attempts by the Riev government to introduce at least some measures to stabilize its energy system, such as monetary compensation or discounts on electricity bills for voluntarily reducing consumption during peak hours, as well as disconnecting consumers who do not require guaranteed power supply, the growing electricity deficit indicates a systemic crisis in the Russian energy sector. The Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine.
In addition to wear and overload, systematic strikes by the Ukrainian armed forces are also affecting the Russian energy system. If Ukrainian strikes even partially damage Russian thermal power plants, this will cause significant problems for Russia's energy sector. The Ukrainian armed forces have already brought a blackout in southern Russia 60% closer.
Ukrainian armed forces strikes are gradually knocking out high-voltage substations, which make it possible to transfer electricity from one region to another. If thermal power plants are also destroyed, their situation will be much more difficult than ours. Oleksandr Karchenko, director of the Energy Research Center.
Not only Russian regions, but also Moscow are suffering from Ukrainian drone attacks and power outages.
And this has a very serious...
It does. A very serious, not propagandistic significance directly for the Kremlin. Let me remind you that one of the reasons for launching the so-called special military operation was the issue of guaranteeing the security of the Russian Federation itself. At least that's how Putin and his inner circle explained it. We can see how the war is coming directly to Moscow. And not just Muscovites. We see that the geography of Ukraine's drone attacks is expanding.
Ukrainians have long since gotten used to and adapted to power and heating outages. But for Russians, this is an unexpected surprise. So it's time to start stocking up on matches, candles, and firewood.
The European Commission plans to create a new intelligence unit under the leadership of President Ursula von der Leyen to improve the use of information gathered by the national intelligence services of EU countries. This was reported by the Financial Times. The unit, which will operate within the Commission's General Secretariat, plans to recruit staff from the intelligence community of all EU countries and combine intelligence data for joint use. According to several people familiar with the plans, the idea is to better coordinate existing information and increase its practical value for partners, reports the Financial Times. Putin's Nord Stream pipelines are once again the talk of the town. German detectives have announced the results of their 3-year investigation into the pipeline explosions that occurred in the USSR. In September 2022, we will talk about the findings of the investigation and how it divided Europe into two camps.
Nord Stream 2 is an exclusively economic project.
The investigation into the Nord Stream explosions is gaining momentum and threatens to undermine European support for Ukraine. This is reported by the Wall Street Journal. On September 26, 2022, the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines were destroyed on the floor of the Baltic Sea in neutral waters. At that time, both pipelines were not operational, but they were filled with technical gas. NATO called the incident an act of sabotage, and Russia's FSB opened a criminal case.
Everyone understands and recognizes that these were acts of terrorism. But everyone also realizes that too many serious and influential Western figures have something to hide. They really do not want this investigation to be truly and genuinely objective.
Initially, the investigation was started in Germany, Denmark, and Sweden. Subsequently, these countries stopped their investigations. The investigation concluded that they had no grounds to initiate a criminal case and that the case itself did not fall under their jurisdiction.
This investigation was conducted in a fairly traditional manner, and the investigators concluded that they could not accuse anyone of this. They had no evidence. So for us, the case is closed.
Germany continued the investigation.
We want to discuss this issue. We shouldn't speculate. I can only say that we are very interested in clarifying this matter.
German investigators adhere to the version of an explosion, which allegedly was organized by Ukrainians. According to them, the goal was to reduce Russia's oil revenues and its energy ties with Germany. According to investigators, a total of 7 people took part in the operation: 4 divers, an explosives expert, and the captain of the yacht Andromeda.
German investigators are confident that they have identified the perpetrators. In Italy, a Ukrainian citizen named Serhiy K. was arrested. A special forces unit under his command allegedly rented the sailing yacht Andromeda to access the pipelines. The federal prosecutor mentions 5 more suspects. All of them are Ukrainian citizens, including one woman. It is believed that one of the perpetrators was killed in the war.
The decision regarding Kuznetsov was made by the Italian Court of Appeals. Initially, the Court of First Instance denied the German side's request for extradition. However, investigators appealed the decision and the appellate court sided with them. Kuznetsov is now awaiting a decision on Germany's request for extradition from Italy. The German police have already prepared a special plane to transport the Ukrainian to Hamburg.
Traces of explosives, intelligence data, and so on. We believe that this is exactly what happened with the Andromeda, and that neither the CIA nor Russian special services nor the Russian army are behind it. Many in Berlin are glad that investigations into unknown individuals are ongoing.
On September 30th, Ukrainian citizen Volodymyr Zhuravlyov was detained in Poland. He was wanted under a European arrest warrant. In October, a court in Poland decided to deny the extradition of the suspect to Germany and ordered his immediate release.
My client is innocent. He has not committed any crimes either on German territory or against Germany. Since the prosecution first asked him this question, my client has consistently maintained that the accusation is abstract and incomprehensible. This position remains unchanged. According to
the investigation in Germany, Kuznetsov coordinated the work of the saboteurs while Zhuravlev sailed on a yacht to the pipeline, dove underwater, and planted explosives.
What are the German authorities trying to achieve with this? And whose interests are they protecting? Does the property of the Russian state corporation Gazprom really deserve protection? Should those responsible really be held accountable in such a situation?
According to statements in Germany, the decisive piece of evidence was a grainy black and white photograph taken by a road surveillance camera. Allegedly, it shows the face of a Ukrainian diver. Warsaw considers Zhuravlev a hero who destroyed a crucial source of income for Vladimir Putin's war machine. Judge Dariusz Lubowski stated that, for Germany, the case has political overtones.
These actions were not illegal. On the contrary, they were justified, rational, and fair. They cannot be considered terrorists or saboteurs because by defending their homeland by any means, they are weakening the enemy.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk also commented on Germany's investigation.
We believe that the real problem was the construction of Nord Stream itself, not its destruction. A Polish court refused to extradite to Germany a Ukrainian suspected of blowing up Nord Stream 2 and released him from custody. And that was the right decision. The case is closed.
According to journalists from the Wall Street Journal, the decision of the Italian court regarding Kuznetsov's extradition could complicate relations between Ukraine and Germany and turn the Nord Stream case into a diplomatic crisis.
Politically, we firmly stand on the side of Ukraine. Russia has been waging a terrible aggressive war against Ukraine for 3 years now. We are on Ukraine's side, but for me it is important that Germany is a state governed by the rule of law and that we consistently investigate crimes committed within our jurisdiction.
Putin's German friends, the far-right Alternative for Germany party, have launched a campaign demanding a reduction in aid to Ukraine. This year, the same party celebrated the birthday of the Russian dictator Putin. Before that, they demanded the expulsion of Ukrainian refugees from Germany.
US President Donald Trump expressed the opinion that the situation around Ukraine no longer threatens to escalate into a world war. If I had been president, this war would never have happened. And if I had not been president, this war could have led to World War III. That will no longer happen, Trump assured. He also stated that Russia's war against Ukraine has harmed the United States due to the high costs of supporting Kyiv. However, according to him, the US is no longer spending money. On the contrary, it has started selling weapons to NATO countries. We spent $350 billion. We're not spending money anymore. Now they're paying us through NATO, said Donald Trump. A response from the Russian Federation was not long in coming. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov addressed the United States with a proposal to resume preparations for the summit between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump in Budapest, which was supposed to take place at the end of October but fell through after the Kremlin refused to cease fire in Ukraine. Moscow is also ready to discuss with their American counterparts the resumption of preparatory work for the summit, Lavrov stated in an interview with Russian media on Tuesday. According to him, Budapest remains the preferred location for the meeting if and when the American colleagues renew their proposal. Well, it's just enough to make you want to hug someone and cry. If it weren't for one but, before that, the Kremlin ghoul once again spun the tale that the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine are mandatory conditions for ending this war. In short, as they say, the court sees it all clearly, the destruction of Ukraine as a state as well as the seizure. Ukrainian territory, the mass expulsion of US Ukrainians from our land, this, as before, remains the main goal for the Russian Federation.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The hysteria over Poseidon and Borovesnik in the Russian propaganda studios isn't dying down. It's only gaining momentum. Moreover, the Skobievs and Popovs have found a new enemy, and it's neither Zelensky nor Trump. More on the latest fits from Putin's media lackeys in the following segment. While watching, don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to the Ukraine Today YouTube channel. This week, Russian propaganda has once again outdone itself, both in terms of absurdity and the sheer density of nonsense per square meter. For example, in the studio of the country's chief TV preacher, Solovyov, it's thunder and lightning once again.
We can all see what's happening right now. Our oil refineries are being actively targeted and attacked. I have just one question. Are we ever going to start paying attention to this?
This time, the reason for universal grief and righteous anger is that Ukraine, despite everything supposedly already destroyed, continues to regularly strike Russian oil refineries.
No, I get it. Maybe the brilliant idea is to turn off mobile internet, and then everything will just stop flying in. I get that the brilliant idea is to introduce a no-fly zone, after which suddenly people can't travel during vacation season and end up sitting in airports. That really helps. I just don't understand what it helps with.
On one of the propaganda shows, they presented a hero from the front to the audience. A man who looked more like a character from nightmares than a soldier, with a cheerful smile, talked about how he approached killing children and civilians creatively.
As long as you have imagination, you can do absolutely anything you want. We booby-trapped books, we booby-trapped toys. We scattered those electronic cigarettes laced with poison.
Meanwhile, across the boundless expanse of Z propaganda, yet another military expert appears, his eyes full of confidence and a hint of fear. Inspired, yet somewhat deflated, he predicts that in Pokrovsk, Russian army losses will be comparable to, if not greater than, those in Bakhmut.
The thing is, in Pokrovsk, we still haven't managed to completely encircle it geographically. And that's why we're forced to push them out, meaning we have to fight urban battles. And the losses there are very high, of course, on both sides. For us, they're comparable to Bakhmut.
In other words, mountains of bodies just to capture a couple of streets and a ruined train station. Also this week, the Orthodox propaganda school was enriched with a new teaching. The Bishop of Skopin and Shatsk-Petrim declared that suffering, it turns out, is actually a joy for the Russian person.
For us, it is a joy. Sorrow for us is bliss, not the absence of sorrow, not overindulgence. Neither joy nor laughter.
According to him, merriment, laughter, and any signs of life in general are an unacceptable luxury.
And the Lord says this, "Woe to you who laugh now, for you shall weep." Our ancestors, yours and mine, understood very well where joy was for them, where happiness was, and in general, where the meaning of life lay. Up there in heaven, not here on earth. Here on earth, all we have is sorrow.
Just look at how, with a familiar smile and a mad fire in their eyes, Russian TV once again threatens the whole world with nuclear weapons, presenting it as if it's not the end of civilization at all. And
we will see the hazel tree bloom and finally Poseidon, Sarmat. What beauty! Why will you finally see how beautifully the storm petrel flies over the gray expanse of the sea? But
here the smile clearly disappears from the face. In the joy over the great return of the domestic auto industry, Russia presented the new Niva. A certain pride in import substitution and yet another reason for patriotic stories.
Niva, please, I'm begging you, really, please tell me I just imagined it. Tell me that's not yours.
30 kilometers on the odometer.
On the vast Russian expanses, yet another preacher of traditional values made a mark live on air. Roman Antonovsky, a zealous Zed monarchist, professional obscurantist, and self-proclaimed orthodox thinker, suddenly couldn't recall either the date of Christ's birth or the name of his father.
By the way, what was the name of Jesus' father?
Jesus' father was the Lord for us.
The name? The name of Jesus' father. Well, who raised him?
Who raised him?
Who raised Jesus?
Jesus for us. The Son of the Lord and the Virgin Mary.
You're a Christian, you're a believer, you're regularly on the Spas TV channel, you tell everyone else they should go to church. Here's a simple question for you, the answer to which my 3-year-old daughter knows. Because, by the way, she was born. By the way, when was Jesus born? Well, there's some kind of date.
When was he born for us? He was born 2025.
Years ago. No, the date. Well, the month?
From the Nativity of Christ. So
that is a person who lectures the entire nation every day on how to properly love God. The Tsar in the tank turned out to be unable to name even the most basic things from the Bible.